The new play is exploring a tricky family dynamic. The story follows a millionaire father trying to get as wealthy as possible and his two children who feel disgusted by his obsession with money and ruthless exploitation of the poor. This is the first time in 100 years that the choral is being staged in the capital. It was written by German playwright George Kaiser just after the First World War, and Tanya has been speaking to the show's director.
I think most people will not be familiar with the play because it's a very old play that has never been performed in the UK in the last century. So I'm sure people won't have seen it before, which is really exciting, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to stage it in the first place. It was written in 1917 by a German writer called Georg Kaiser. He used to be really big in Germany up until the Nazis, when he completely obliterated him and they destroyed and burned all of his books. So that's one of the reasons why he's not that well known today, sadly. But the play is about a multimillionaire father who had a very traumatic past and has done whatever he can to distance himself from that trauma. And in a way, he's been making himself richer and richer and more powerful in order to be able to, first of all, avoid that traumatic, horrible past, but also protect his two daughters from that horrible, traumatic past. But what happens in the play, and I'm not going to spoil too much, is that the two daughters decide that they don't want to be like their fathers, and they don't want to inherit that wealth, and they don't want to lead that kind of isolating and privileged life, and they want to explore the world, work, and make their own decisions. So it is very much a play about two generations fighting against each other.
And such an interesting, albeit difficult, story behind where the writer comes from and his history. Do you see a lot of, that time in history just after the First World War, a lot of conflict, and I imagine trauma will have come from that? Do you see a lot of perhaps what he went through kind of bleeding into his work and the way that he writes and what he writes about?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, first of all, World War I was a huge inspiration. The Russian Revolution as well, in that sense of wanting to break away from the past and create something different, rebel against the past. Then again, you see characters that for the first time are very psychologically driven, and they try to understand their motives, and they try to understand what is it that drives them, propels them towards a certain motive. So it was a really interesting time for Kaiser to be writing and to be living, and all this exists in the play in a very subtle way, but also you can feel the very rich historical, socio-political context, and it's really exciting to be revisiting that 100 years later, and be also exploring how we haven't changed that much in 100 years.
Yeah. If you think about, the different sort of genres and types of theatre that are available on the West End or off the West End, we think about our sort of Wickeds and the Lion Kings, and it's these huge visual displays. And it's very sort of visually engaging. As a director, how did you approach this story? Because it sounds like it's very, very psychological, a lot about the thought processes and what's going on in people's heads, perhaps not, the sort of colourful scene that you might see in other shows.
We are performing in one of London's most intimate spaces, the Finborough, which is a beautiful, beautiful space, and it's been uncovering all these hidden gems for the past many decades. But it's so intimate that the audience feels like they are on stage with the actors, and they can get to see the details on their faces and the gestures of their hands in a way that it will never be possible in the West End or in those big musicals. We're also exploring, so at the time Kaiser was writing in Germany, there was this huge movement called Expressionism, which was really big also in visual arts, in cinema, and in theatre, which is really great because expressionism also means that you get to express all these emotions in a way that is out there, rather than trying to become to become introvert and to try and hide them or bottle them in. So what's great about these characters is that yes, they feel a lot of things, they have a lot of thoughts, they go through a very complex emotional journey, but they also get to express, and they get to show that in a way which is very physical. So the movement element of the piece is also very interesting and very significant. I've been working really closely with the movement director. We've been using music as our key component to drive through these emotions, to explore these emotions, and to get to see these characters not just as human beings, but also as archetypes, as complex human beings, but also as symbolic existences.
Emily there speaking to Tanya, and the Coral opens tomorrow at the Finborough Theatre and it's on until the end of the month.